It was a cold, foggy evening in November 1991 when Emily Carter left her shift at the local diner. The neon sign flickered behind her as she waved goodbye to her coworkers, the warm glow contrasting sharply with the icy chill outside. Emily, just 17, was known for her bubbly personality and infectious laughter that could brighten even the dullest Tennessee mornings. That night, she seemed perfectly normal, no hints of fear, no signs of distress, but as she walked toward the bus stop, the streetlights flickered in a way that made the shadows feel alive, stretching across the empty sidewalks. Her friends remembered seeing her head down Main Street, her backpack swinging lightly with each step, chatting casually on her way home. Nobody noticed the dark sedan that had been parked too long near the diner's corner, the one with tinted windows that seemed out of place in the sleepy town. No one knew the man inside was watching, waiting for the right moment. In those few minutes, the routine of a teenager walking home would quietly shift into a nightmare that would haunt the town for decades. Emily's parents reported her missing the next morning when she never returned home, and the panic set in immediately. Her mother called her friends in a frantic search for any clue, while her father drove around town, scanning the familiar streets with a sense of dread growing heavier with each passing minute. Police were notified, but at first, it seemed like any typical runaway case, until detectives noticed the lack of any lead, no note, no signs of her departure, nothing. Emily hadn't packed, hadn't called anyone. She had simply vanished. The community, once peaceful and trusting, felt a sudden ripple of fear. Everyone knew Emily Carter. She was part of the town's pulse, the girl you'd see at the coffee shop on weekends or helping out at local charity events. Her disappearance was not just a personal tragedy. It was a wound on the town itself. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered about a stranger in town. Others wondered if she had run away willingly. But deep down, everyone feared the truth was far darker. By the end of that first day, the local police had started a small-scale search, canvassing the streets, questioning neighbors, and checking local businesses. Yet with every hour that passed, the chilling reality set in. Emily was gone, and there were no footprints to follow. The fog that had blanketed the town that evening seemed to seep into the hearts of everyone who cared for her, creating an unsettling sense that something sinister had crept quietly into their small, familiar world. After Emily Carter vanished that chilly November night, the investigation began in earnest, but the trail quickly grew cold. Detectives scoured the town, interviewing every neighbor, friend, and even casual acquaintances, but each lead seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. They checked abandoned houses, creeks, and the surrounding forests, hoping to find a clue, a shoe, a scrap of clothing, anything. But the search yielded nothing. The streets that had once felt safe now carried an eerie tension, as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for answers that never came. Emily's friends recounted every detail they could remember, from the color of her jacket to the way she twirled her hair when nervous, but none of it led anywhere. Even her small group of close confidants couldn't recall anything out of the ordinary that night. Every tip sent to the police seemed to fizzle out, leaving the detectives frustrated and the family desperate. The lack of concrete evidence meant that the case slowly slipped from the headlines, buried in the stacks of unresolved reports, labeled as cold but never forgotten by those who loved her. As weeks turned into months, the emotional toll on Emily's family became palpable. Her parents refused to accept the idea that she might never come back. Her mother kept her room exactly the same, leaving the curtains open to catch the morning light, the bed neatly made, and her favorite books stacked on the nightstand. Every day brought new hope, new fear, and the agonizing wait for a phone call or knock on the door that never came. Her father spent countless nights driving through the town's empty streets, scanning the shadows, replaying the events of that night over and over in his mind, searching for any sign he had missed. Even the town itself felt the lingering weight of Emily's disappearance. Shopkeepers whispered about strange cars parked too long near the diner. Kids exchanged uneasy glances when walking home from school, and locals couldn't help but glance over their shoulders more often. Every missing piece of information seemed to taunt the townspeople, a reminder that evil, or at least something unknown, had silently entered their quiet streets. Fear replaced trust, and even casual conversations carried a sense of unease as everyone tried to make sense of the senseless. Years went by, and the trail remained frozen. Leads that once seemed promising dissolved under scrutiny, and the case files gathered dust in the police archives. Forensic technology was primitive compared to today, and without witnesses or evidence, Emily's disappearance became a haunting mystery, one that stretched beyond the family and into the collective consciousness of the town. People moved on, but Emily's absence lingered like a a silent question mark that refused to fade, keeping her story alive even in the absence of answers. 3 decades had passed since Emily Carter vanished, and the case had faded from the public eye. Her name lingered only in the whispers of locals and in dusty police files labeled cold. But one ordinary afternoon in 2021, a young man browsing a small, cluttered pawn shop in Nashville stumbled upon something that would shatter years of silence. Tucked behind old coins and vintage watches was a delicate gold locket, its chain tangled but intact. The shop owner shrugged, mentioning that it had been traded in by someone who had long since disappeared. To the untrained eye, it was just another piece of jewelry, but something about it felt strangely familiar. Inside the locket was a faded photograph, the kind taken decades ago, yellowed with age but still recognizable. It showed a young girl with a shy smile, hair pulled back neatly, staring straight at the camera as if she knew the world was watching. On the back of the photo were initials, EC, written in careful, almost childish script. The young man froze, an unshakable feeling crawling up his spine. He showed the locket to a friend, and before long, the image was shared online. Social media users were quick to identify the girl, Emily Carter, the teenager who had vanished without a trace in Tennessee 30 years prior. The discovery of the locket reignited a firestorm of attention. News outlets picked up the story, and the hashtag #FindEmilyCarter began trending across platforms. People speculated wildly about how the locket had survived all these years, who had owned it, and what it might reveal. Some feared it could be a clue left by the very person responsible for her disappearance. Others hoped it might finally bring closure to a case that had haunted families for generations. Suddenly, Emily's story was no longer a distant memory. It had returned to the forefront of public consciousness, demanding answers. Police were immediately notified and the investigation was reopened. Detectives traced the locket's chain of ownership, piecing together the murky history of how it ended up in the pawn shop. Records revealed that it had been sold multiple times, moving quietly from one hand to another, but always remaining elusive to authorities. Experts examined the locket for fingerprints, hair samples, and any trace of DNA, hoping that even a single clue could break open the decades-old mystery. For the first time in years, hope mingled with fear. The case might finally start revealing its secrets, but at what cost? As word spread, locals revisited the night Emily disappeared, remembering strange cars, odd figures, and small details that had seemed insignificant at the time. Suddenly, memories that had been buried for years resurfaced. People who had once been silent now came forward, sharing stories of shadowy encounters and unexplained events that had surrounded the town in 1991. The locket, small and unassuming, had become a key that unlocked more than just metal. It opened a door to a series of chilling revelations that no one could have anticipated. The moment the locket surfaced, Tennessee law enforcement wasted no time reopening Emily Carter's cold case. Detectives dusted off decades-old files, combing through every report, witness statement, and photograph as if they were seeing them for the first time. Old evidence boxes, long ignored, were carefully examined under new forensic technology. Fingerprint analysis, DNA testing, and even digital enhancements of faded photographs were employed in hopes of uncovering clues that had eluded investigators in 1991. The tiniest detail, a smudge, a footprint, or a misfiled note, could now make all the difference. Police also began tracing the chain of ownership for the locket. Records from the pawn shop revealed that it had been sold by a man who no longer lived in the area. Investigators dug into his background, interviewing neighbors and family, searching for any connection to Emily or the night she disappeared. Every lead brought more questions than answers. Why had he sold the locket after all these years? And where had it been in the 3 decades since Emily vanished? The simple piece of jewelry suddenly became the thread that could unravel a web of secrets carefully hidden for 30 years. As the investigation progressed, detectives revisited witnesses from the original case. Some remembered fleeting details they had long forgotten, while others were hesitant to speak, burdened by decades of fear or guilt. A former diner employee mentioned seeing a shadowy figure near the parking lot that had never been reported, and a local teenager recalled a strange man lingering near Emily's school weeks before she vanished. These small recollections, once overlooked, suddenly held weight in the context of the newly discovered locket. Forensic experts also re-examined items recovered in 1991, such as Emily's backpack, the remnants of her personal belongings, and old clothing. With modern technology, DNA traces that had once been useless were now analyzed for potential matches. Even old photographs from the town square were enhanced to reveal figures lurking in the background, shapes that had previously gone unnoticed. Each discovery, though small, added layers to the puzzle, painting a chilling picture of premeditation, observation, and an unknown predator who had been hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, the local community was captivated. News reports and social media posts kept the case in public attention, and the renewed scrutiny pressured everyone involved. The townspeople, long accustomed to the mystery lingering in the shadows, now felt a growing tension as if the past itself were pressing down on them. The reopening of the investigation was more than a procedural act. It was a resurrection of decades-old fear, and every revelation brought Emily's disappearance back into sharp, haunting focus. As detectives dug deeper, they began uncovering pieces of Emily Carter's story that had been buried for decades, overlooked in the original investigation. Among the most significant discoveries were her old diary entries, donated anonymously to a local historical society by someone who had known Emily personally. The pages revealed the private thoughts of a young girl who had sensed unease in her small town. A series of entries mentioning a mysterious man who often appeared where she least expected, lingering near the diner, the bus stop, even her favorite park. At first, the references seemed innocent or imagined, but now, with the Locket resurfacing, these hints took on a chilling new significance. Further clues came from locals who finally spoke up, some motivated by the media attention and renewed police presence. A former janitor recalled seeing a car parked suspiciously near the diner late at night on the evening Emily vanished. He had dismissed it at the time, thinking little of a stranger in town, but now it seemed far too coincidental. Another neighbor remembered hearing faint, unexplained voices in the woods behind Emily's house on multiple occasions in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Each detail, no matter how small, began to form a disturbing pattern that painted the presence of someone watching, planning, and waiting. Even physical evidence that had been tucked away for 30 years suddenly took on new meaning. Faded photographs from the town square, long forgotten, showed shadowy figures standing just beyond the frame, barely noticeable to the casual eye. Old witness statements, previously dismissed, were revisited with a fresh perspective. The tiniest inconsistencies, the name of a vehicle, the timing of a casual observation, now became critical. The detectives realized that the very clues they had once overlooked were not errors or coincidences, but breadcrumbs carefully laid, leading them toward the truth. Police also began to piece together Emily's social life in those final months. Friends and classmates recalled unusual behavior. Someone following her on walks home, strange notes slipped into her locker, and whispered conversations she refused to explain. A pattern emerged of escalating surveillance, subtle intimidation, and a fear she had confided only in herself through her diary. Every newly uncovered detail, once innocent or dismissed, now felt like part of a sinister game that someone had been playing for far too long. The more clues emerged, the darker the picture became. It was clear that Emily's disappearance had been no accident. Someone had been meticulously observing her life, taking note of routines, and orchestrating a plan that left no immediate trace. The locket, now understood as more than a simple keepsake, symbolized the key to unlocking the mystery. Each hidden clue added tension, suspense, and dread, not just for the investigators, but for the town itself. A chilling realization settled in. The darkness that had claimed Emily was far from simple, and the truth was slowly beginning to claw its way to the surface. Weeks of investigation finally led police to a man who had lived in the small Tennessee town at the time of Emily Carter's disappearance but had quietly moved away shortly afterward. At first glance, he seemed like any ordinary resident, unremarkable and easily overlooked. Yet, as detectives dug into his history, a chilling picture began to emerge. He had been acquainted with several of Emily's friends and had been seen near the diner and bus stop on multiple occasions, always blending into the background. With the locket now in evidence, they could finally connect him to items that had been in Emily's possession, tying him directly to the case in ways that had once seemed impossible. The initial interview was tense and unsettling. The man maintained a calm demeanor, almost unnervingly so, answering questions in measured tones, denying any knowledge of Emily or her disappearance. But investigators noticed subtle signs of unease, a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation before answering, hands trembling ever so slightly. They knew that decades of evasion could not hide the truth forever, and the pressure began to mount. Every carefully constructed alibi started to unravel when cross-referenced with old witness statements and newly discovered clues. As the investigation deepened, police obtained a warrant to search his storage unit, and what they found inside was horrifying. Boxes labeled with dates, photographs, and letters were meticulously arranged, chronicling an obsession that had grown over months and years. Among the items were personal effects that belonged to Emily, items that had never been recovered or reported missing, now confirming that someone had been keeping them all along. Handwritten notes detailed observations of her routine, her friends, and even her family, proving that the man had been quietly monitoring her life in a sinister, calculated manner. Each revelation brought new urgency to the investigation. The police pieced together the sequence of events on the night Emily vanished, aligning witness recollections with the man's own tenuous movements and the items found in his possession. Every inconsistency in his story became a critical piece of the puzzle. Detectives realized that he had exploited the small town's sense of security, knowing that no one would suspect him. What had once seemed like a cold case frozen in time now had a face, a man who had remained hidden in plain sight, whose actions had haunted the town silently for 30 years. The unmasking of the suspect sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had once walked past him without thought now recalled fleeting, uncomfortable encounters, strange behavior, and subtle signs they had ignored. The realization that someone so close could harbor such darkness left a lingering fear over the town. With forensic evidence, personal belongings, and decades-old clues converging, it became clear that Emily's disappearance had not been random, but orchestrated by someone calculating and patient, someone who had hidden in the shadows until the moment the truth finally came to light. Once the suspect was firmly linked to Emily Carter through the locket, forensic evidence, and personal items found in his storage, the investigation entered its most intense phase. Detectives confronted him with the mountain of proof they had compiled over weeks, each piece meticulously catalogued to show a clear connection to Emily's disappearance. The man, once calm and collected, began to show cracks in his demeanor, a flicker of panic, a nervous glance, a subtle shift in tone. The weight of decades of evasion was closing in, and the carefully constructed facade he had maintained for 30 years was finally unraveling. The interrogation revealed chilling details that had remained hidden for decades. The suspect admitted to watching Emily for months, learning her routines, and planning her abduction with precision. He described moments that had seemed innocent at the time. Strangers in the parking lot, cars parked oddly, fleeting encounters, but were all calculated moves in a sinister plan. Every detail confirmed what investigators had feared. This was not a random disappearance, but the result of careful, obsessive premeditation. The town's long-held fears about the night of Emily's vanishing were validated in the most disturbing way. Police also uncovered disturbing evidence of how the suspect had manipulated others in the town, using his ordinary persona to deflect suspicion. Friends, neighbors, and even employees at the diner had unknowingly provided him opportunities to observe Emily without question. He had exploited the trust inherent in a small community, making it nearly impossible for anyone to suspect his involvement. The investigation revealed that for 30 years, Emily's absence had been a silent weight in the town. But now the darkness behind it had a face, a man whose obsession had remained hidden in plain sight, leaving scars that would last far beyond his arrest. For Emily's family, the revelations were a mixture of horror and relief. The emotional rollercoaster that began in 1991 culminated in a confrontation with the truth, painful yet necessary. While nothing could erase the trauma, the discovery of what had happened offered answers that had been desperately sought for decades. The locket, the small, overlooked piece of jewelry, had been the key that finally unlocked the case. It bridged the gap between the unknown and the undeniable, turning rumors and fear into facts and evidence. The town itself was shaken, revisiting the night Emily disappeared with new understanding. The sense of security that had been taken for granted was permanently altered, and the people who had once moved on were forced to reckon with the horrifying reality that evil had lived among them undetected. Yet even in the face of darkness, the investigation brought a form of justice, a recognition that Emily's story mattered, that the truth had been uncovered, and that no case, no matter how cold, should ever be forgotten. The locket had done more than reveal a crime. It had exposed decades of hidden fear, obsession, and ultimately, the relentless pursuit of justice. And so, after 30 long years, a small, forgotten locket became the key that unlocked a nightmare long buried in the shadows of Tennessee. Emily Carter's story, once silenced by fear and mystery, finally demanded to be heard. The truth revealed the darkness that had lingered too close for too long. But it also reminded us of the resilience of hope, the power of persistence, and the unshakable belief that no case should ever be left cold. Even in the quietest towns, where life seems ordinary, secrets can hide in plain sight. And sometimes, it takes just one small clue, one overlooked object, one glimmer of memory, to bring the past roaring back, demanding justice, demanding answers. Emily's disappearance was not forgotten, and now, thanks to that locket, neither will the lessons of her story be. Let this be a warning and a testament. The smallest detail can change everything. The smallest object can reveal the biggest truth. And while evil may linger in the shadows, the relentless search for justice and the courage to face the unknown will always shine a light on what was once lost.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.